Thank you so much. I won't be going overtime today because it does not take that long to say that men are not women. So some of you may know me as wine girl number 2 from the gala dinner last night. But otherwise, I am the Giggle in the Giggle versus Tickle legal fight that has been going on in Australia for the past few years. Also, sorry about my voice, I've lost my voice. Tickle v Giggle was as it started, and now Giggle v Tickle was the first sex versus gender identity discrimination case in the world. And Australia had a real opportunity last year to lead the way with sanity and rationality and reality, and went in the complete opposite direction, unfortunately. So basically, how I got dragged into all of this is I started a social networking platform exclusively for women called Giggle. It was where women could connect to find roommates, freelance work. We had a lesbian dating component, pregnancy, anything specifically female. Also sort of a Twitter, Reddit-style forum where women could speak without any male interruption or have conversations where they might not want men to be involved. It was a response in direct to, thank you. It was in response to the misogyny and sexism that women do face online. It was actually not in response to the nonsense that is gender ideology. In fact, I didn't know about it. Before we'd even officially launched, we were on the App Store and Google Play doing beta testing, and I woke up one morning to thousands upon thousands of men on the app and leaving 1-star reviews calling us transphobic and TERFs, and I'd never actually heard that word before. One of the things they also said was I had to go and educate myself, which is probably the only fair comment they ever made. So I did. I went and Googled what a TERF was, and I found, especially in the UK, these women who were speaking out about the fact that not only were men claiming to be women, but governments and institutions were taking them seriously. I still didn't know at the time what had actually happened in Australia, but I soon found out. So basically, I made a decision as the CEO of the company to tread water. I honestly thought the claim was so preposterous that it would blow over. I remember saying to my mum, this will be all over in about 4 months. No one will take these people seriously. They do. Basically, in the beginning of 2022, I received an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint from a man who claims to be a woman, citing gender identity discrimination because I had removed him from the platform, a platform he'd actually never used, but had onboarded and been kicked off. To be able to settle the complaint in the Australian Human Rights Commission, I was expected to allow him onto the platform exclusively for women, allow all men who claim to be women onto the platform, attend sex and gender education, which could only be re-education, pay him $20,000, apologize to him, and moderate, I think this is the most sinister, moderate all of the content on the app so that no man who claims to be a woman would be offended by it. Yeah. It does turn it into a man's app. In fact, I feel like when I set out to do something for women, exclusively for women, I've spent the last 5 years exclusively talking about men. I felt very much that from the first day that I got this complaint that the Australian Human Rights Commission / the Sex Discrimination Commission was never at all considering the fact that I also have human rights, and by extension that every other Australian citizen has human rights. I found that they were siding exclusively with men who claim to be women, not even everyone who has a gender identity. It was exclusively men who claim to be women. When I got the Australian Human Rights Commission complaint, I was about 14 weeks pregnant, and they were saying things in their submissions such as sex assigned at birth, but I'd found out at 20 weeks that I was having a girl. So my lived experience was the complete opposite of the ideological nonsense that they were trying to push through. And I had to make a decision of what I was going to do. My barrister, Bridie Nolan, who had come on board, was very, very good in telling me exactly where this would go if I didn't settle, that it would go to federal court and all the way through to the High Court, and that it had never been challenged. It wasn't that this law was working well for the 10 years that it had existed, and I'll get into that in a second. It was that people were being intimidated by the Sex Discrimination Commission with these complaints where they'd have to settle for $20,000 or $10,000. And I thought long and hard about it. I remember sitting on my balcony and thinking, aside from my rights and women's rights and the concept of reality and truth, I was about to have a daughter, and I was like, if I'm going to eventually have to teach her to stand up for herself. And even if it feels impossible or if it's really, really hard, and if I back down at the first moment that it has been really difficult in my life, then how on earth would I ever teach her to stand up for herself? So I decided to decline conciliation. And not settle in the Australian Human Rights Commission, and so it did escalate to the federal court. Now, what essentially the problem is here is that in 2013, Australia's first female Prime Minister, who has dined out on that fact for the better part of a decade, allowed amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, which took out the definitions of both man and woman and put in the definition of gender identity. Yes. Which, I mean, the problem is there wouldn't be so much of a problem with that because if it wasn't for the Sex Discrimination Commission itself being so captured that their interpretation of the law, which law is always open for interpretation, is so ideological that they have completely forgotten that the Sex Discrimination Act should favour sex first and foremost. So the Sex Discrimination Commissioner intervened in the court case as amicus curiae, which they have a statutory right to be able to do. They intervened, they're supposed to, amicus curiae is a friend of the court, and they're there to interpret the law and to help the judge. They intervened completely on the side of gender ideology. From the very first moment they intervened, they were saying absolutely ludicrous things like men who claim to be women should be entitled to pregnancy protections in case anybody thinks that could happen. So the first round in the federal court was long and stressful, which culminated in the decision from Justice Bromwich saying that sex is changeable, siding with men who claim to be women, that they can be women under law. Now, it is a lie. It's 100% a lie because, as we all know, sex is not changeable. Documents can be changeable, but sex is not. This is not even a correct statement in law of how the law even works. No human being on this planet has ever changed sex. One of the problems is in this country is in state law, people are allowed to change their sex marker on their birth certificate. In this state, for example, any of you could go tomorrow to the Birth, Deaths and Marriages office. It's $126, and you can change the sex marker on your birth certificate to the opposite or anything so long that it is under 100 characters and doesn't include swear words. Yes, and not only that, you can do it annually. So, of course, we appealed, and the appeal was heard this year in the full federal court in front of 3 judges, and we're currently waiting for the decision on that, which hopefully will come sometime before Christmas. It usually takes about 3 to 6 months to get a decision, and our hearing was in August. I will say I'm optimistic. I think that there has been a zeitgeist change globally that some people in Australia are not aware of or willfully blind to it. I don't think that, for example, some of them read the news of what's happening in both America and the UK, but in the US, for example, they have effectively won this issue politically, and in the UK, they've won it legally. So in Australia, because we have next to no real political pushback on this, it's going to have to be won in the courts, and that's why we're here. So all of this obviously does sound completely crazy, but it actually, if you can believe it, gets a little bit crazier. The first round in court cost $560,000 for me in legal fees. The appeal cost, when it's finally all said and done, will be $1.2 million. When we go to the High Court, it will be anywhere between $1 to $2 million in legal fees. I've been able to do this, raise the money for this through crowdfunding, through the generosity of mums and dads and concerned citizens and women and men, everyone, all around the world, but especially in Australia, with $10, $20, $50, $100 donations. We've never had any big backers. We don't, to this day, have any big backers. I know there's a lot of people who think that J.K. Rowling is paying the bills. She is not. I currently have $500,000 in legal invoices sitting on my desk that have to be paid. The other side, meanwhile, has no financial stake in this. It is all pro bono plus funded by the Grata Fund, which is a social justice legislation initiative to give money to people for legislative change in the direction that they want it to go, and we all know what that direction is. So yes, it is very, very expensive, and we can litigate in a different conversation about how expensive lawyers are. It's definitely a conversation to be had, but I actually, my position is not only the fact that people who are doing their profession should be paid, but the people who have been on my team and supporting me have actually been doing the work. I was talking to a senator not long ago, and she was just sort of quite flabbergasted with how expensive it is. And I said, yeah, but at least they're doing the work. Politicians could fix this for free in a week. So Giggle v. Tickle is not the only court case in Australia that is dealing with this issue. Another one that's very, very important that's just had an absolutely disastrous decision is Kira Lee Smith, and she is here somewhere. Hi. Kira Lee Smith is the spokeswoman for an organization called Binary, which exists to fight gender ideology in law and society. And she put on Facebook that there are a few posts about men in women's sports. These two men have dragged her through courts for vilification and have AVOs taken out against her, and she's now lost and is preparing to appeal. This is probably the most chilling case in Australia that everybody should be focusing on, and it is not getting the attention it deserves. If Kira Lee Smith, who is the spokeswoman for Binary, does not have the right to political communication, then no one in this country does. Not one politician, not one person in media. It means that every single person who has spoken at this event this week could be done for vilification, and they will lose because the precedent has been set. So Kira Lee needs all of the attention and support that we can give her. Another one is Gillian Spencer, who is a child psychologist in Queensland. She's had her contract terminated by Queensland Health and is no longer working purely because she wants to be able to talk children through the supposed distress of gender dysphoria and not affirm them. I think it's really important to note that this is not strictly a left or right issue. We can definitely talk about the fact that there's one side of it who is indulging it and one who is not. It's not even just a women's rights issue, and I think it sells it short. It's always sold it short to say that gender ideology only affects women's rights. It affects everybody. Everybody has the right to acknowledge what they see with their own eyes, to live in reality, to have freedom of speech, freedom of belief, and freedom of association. We're told constantly it's a fringe issue and it doesn't matter, but that's never told to the other side. These men on the fringe who wanted to claim to be women and infiltrate our spaces and our sports and our services, they were never told, oh, it's just a fringe issue, go away and deal with it. But we are. We're here constantly that it's trans rights are human rights, but it's not a human right to be able to claim to be something you're not and recognized in law as that thing, or to take away other people's human rights. It's always very important to remember when fighting this that if they can make you believe men are women, they can make you believe absolutely everything. And that's why it is so important to fight. Just this past weekend, news broke that there is a male pedophile who abused his own daughter, who is now claiming to be a woman, and he is in a Victorian women's prison. There's no media in this country that has covered this case as of yet. No one has spoken out about it. However, Jacinta Allen, Anthony Albanese, and Anna Cody, who, from all of her submissions into the court case against me, is on this man's side, should have to explain why they are choosing the rights of perverted criminals over ordinary citizens. It is my opinion that Anna Cody should resign as Sex Discrimination Commissioner. This is not cancel culture either. It's simply that if you do not know what sex is, you should not be the Sex Discrimination Commissioner. So a big part of this weekend is ACT. Now, I know that not everybody can act on really controversial issues. Everybody has jobs to protect and families to protect, but this is what it looks like to act. It's not always glamorous, it's a roller coaster, it's highs and lows. Sometimes it's absolutely devastating, sometimes it's absolutely terrifying. All we ask the women who are standing up and acting, that we've been doing it for many, many years with very little attention and very little support, next to no institutional support. All we ask is that you are able to support us as much as you possibly can, because sometimes we are doing this running on empty. So if you can support, one of the ways to support me is at gigglecrowdfund.com. We need all the money in the world to be able to fight this, because it is going to go to the High Court, and while the other side gets a free ride, we do not. So if you would like more information, please never ever hesitate to email me, direct message me, anything that you want. I'm always happy to talk to everybody to explain more of the situation and what's at stake and answer any questions that anybody has. And finally, I'd just like to say that men can never, ever be women. And if we can't say that, we don't live in a free society. Thank you.